Okay, perfect. So this week, obviously, we read about Lance Armstrong, which I think was an easier topic for me to read about just because, last week when we were talking about NASA, a lot of that has happened before I was born, I know, or it just hasn't been in the spotlight quite as much since I've been born. But I remember like the whole scandal breaking with Lance Armstrong. So obviously, he's an amazing cyclist, one of the most renowned in the entire world. But he was caught using multiple times different performance enhancing drugs, including blood transfusions, testosterone, all that stuff. And he denied it forever, finally got caught, huge scandal, and he was kind of banned from the official sport for life. Does that kind of sum up the story well?
Yeah, pretty much.
Perfect. So the questions that we're supposed to cover are pretty much the same from the discussion board this week, which I don't know if you guys saw, but I thought we were supposed to write a paper like normal. So I wrote a full paper and then just ended up posting that in the board.
I remember seeing that.
Okay. So the first question it asks is, what is Lance Armstrong's legacy in your opinion?
I'm pulling mine up. Let's see.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, I said he was once regarded as a terrific athlete. He will now be remembered as an athlete that cheated his way to the top of his game. His legacy, I think he destroyed it. I mean, I guess it would be don't cheat for others. Use him as an example of what not to do. Even though he's tarnished his image and his dignity and everything else, he's really. But then again, well, we're getting into it. I'll get into more parts later. Okay, I think I said enough for
now. Emily, do you have any thoughts on his legacy?
I would say another part of his legacy is cancer, like the huge Live Strong bracelets. I remember wearing those all the time, and I think I remember seeing him on the Wheaties box. He was super popular and famous, and we all were cheering for him. And then he finally admitted, I guess in 2013, I didn't realize it took him that long, to scandal. He's like, yeah, I did do all of that. So I would agree with Phil that it's someone that was so successful, but then they cheated their way to get there. So I guess that's kind of I don't know, take it with a grain of salt, I guess, someone's success, especially in sports, because it may be enhanced by steroids or blood transfusions or whatever. So
yeah, I completely agree with you guys. And another thought I had was just, and you kind of said this, but how sad it is because he was so successful and just world famous. And it's almost like when I think about him now, that's what I think about is the scandal. And it's kind of overshadowed all of the amazing things that he did. And no one really seems to remember those anymore. I had another thought. I can't remember what it was. That's okay. So Armstrong organized and led what was perhaps the most sophisticated and comprehensive cheating program in the history of sports. Who suffered from his cheating and what were the costs?
I can go first again. I'm just going to read off what I wrote. I think that in part all of the athletes that were honest and did not use drugs suffered because as hard as they tried, they had the disadvantage to those who did use the drugs. I also felt that Lance suffered the most when he finally realized how his obsessions to be the best at all costs eventually led to his downfall. So he lost his respect and his dignity.
Yeah, I agree. Go ahead.
I agree with that too. I think really everyone suffered. The U.S. suffered, because our pride, kind of our ego was hurt because he was a huge world athlete. For us, he was, I don't know, he was probably one of the few Americans competing in the race, and he had won 7 straight seasons, 7 straight tours. So I don't know, the fact that people put so much money and energy behind him, and then they're like, wait, by the way, all of this was a lie. It's kind of embarrassing, big time. And I think also a lot of his teammates, all of them, suffered because they were pressured into using the same drugs that he did, whether or not they wanted to.
Yeah, I totally agree. Another thought I had, and this came to me while I was reading the second article, was that his family really suffered and his children, whether or not they know it, because you know how your parents like really seem to shape. Oh, sorry, Ellen just said she thought that we were skipping this week's. So his family, you know, like when your parents teach you, like a lot of with politics, that's a good example. People just tend to go towards their parents' opinions. And so maybe his kids don't realize, like they think that he was totally fine just like he did. But in the long run, they're suffering because they're learning those same traits. And he had a quote in that second paper. I don't remember it exactly, but it's something to do with like you can't just teach them and force them and then one day expect them to be able to make their own decisions. You know, you have to start with the foundation and help them and nurture them from the very beginning, which I feel like he wasn't doing with the example he was setting at all. Are there any other thoughts before we move on to the next question? Okay. Were the other riders, Hamilton, Landis, and those who testified, too loyal to Armstrong or not loyal enough?
I would say that they were not loyal enough, because if you're loyal, then you're willing to do what's best for your friends or your family. So that would mean like getting him to stop and I guess eventually turning him in instead of like, I don't know, being influenced by him and kind of being passive, I guess, and taking the drugs also instead of standing up for themselves more.
Yeah, I had that. They were loyal to Lance at first, and then they started taking the drugs. But when they realized how wrong it was, they had a conscience, and they stopped doing it and began speaking up about the truth.
Yeah, I think that I mentioned this in my paper. To me, it wasn't really a question of whether or not they were loyal to Armstrong, but whether or not they were loyal to themselves. Because all of them ended up terribly, you know, like they all got into the blood transfusions and no one just wakes up and says, let's do it. Today's the day. You know, that sounds miserable. And so I think that for them, they started their disloyalty like to themselves when they took that first testosterone pill or when they decided to cheat for the first time. And they just kept going until like they pretty much just lost themselves as both a human and as an athlete. And they got way off track from I'm sure where they wanted to be. And so I think that them kind of like ratting on Armstrong when the cases came out, it was kind of their first steps in fixing themselves a little bit. They were coming back to reality almost.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. We're just cruising through these. Think about a situation where you witnessed a leader, formal or informal, make a decision for others that made you uncomfortable. What was the situation and how did you feel about it?
I can share an experience I had when I worked for the Home Depot.
Okay.
I had a supervisor who was tasked with a lot of tasks, and of course, he would pass those down on to us. But our job was there to help customers, and this was back when I was like, I don't know, 13, 14 years ago, when they were really busy all the time. So we were told to stop helping customers and do the tasks. But the customers are the one like paying our payroll by buying the products. Well, I felt bad by avoiding customers because I was told to. If I helped more than others, I still tried to help when I could. But that's the experience I had where our leader told us to avoid the customers and do the tasks.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
I couldn't think of one, honestly. Still
Yeah,
racking my brain.
I had a hard time too.
Yeah.
And I wrote about this. It sounds terrible. It's a little bit of a stretch. But I kind of compared Lance Armstrong to Hitler, just in leadership style. I know, it's awful. But I was thinking about it, and like you read a lot of the times, because I think those books are like fascinating, World War II. And a lot of times that the Nazi soldiers, they didn't want to be doing what they were doing, but they're following orders like for the good of their nation, for the good of their country and their leader. And I think that kind of went along with Lance's teammates, because like I said, like they didn't just decide to do this one day. It was they were told, like, you need to do this for the good of the team. And when the team is successful, you're successful, and then eventually you'll be a team leader, whatever they're called. And so I think that for them, it wasn't like they wanted to be doing this necessarily. They just knew that they had to. They were being told to. Terrible example, but it's all I could come up with at the time.
No, I think that's a fine example.
So, kind of digging deeper into that question, think about a situation where you witness talented followers follow a leader into an uncomfortable or bad zone. What was the situation? What were the results? And did anyone object?
I didn't have an experience to put on this, so I left that one blank. But what just came to mind when you were reading this, I didn't witness it other than seeing it on television. How I don't remember how long ago it was. I think it was Jonestown, Africa, or when that one religious cult leader got all those people to follow him and listen and take the poison, and they all died.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great example of that. I think like in a more sense that maybe each of us can personally relate to is, when you're in high school or younger and you just want to look cool with your friends or like the people you think are your friends, and they're probably not making the best decisions, but because you want to just hang out with them, you follow them, even though you know it's not the right thing to be doing.
Hey, Ellen.
Hey, Ellen.
Sorry for being late.
No problem. That was confusing.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hey.
Yeah, so we won't be meeting next Thursday because that's Thanksgiving for us. So.
I can't hear you, Molly.
You can't hear me? Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I can hear you now.
Yeah, so next Thursday is Thanksgiving for us, so we won't meet then.
Okay.
Yeah,
I should have known it because I've been like for years studying at BYU, but I just can't keep it in mind.
Yeah, you're all good. It changes the date every year, so.
Yeah.
So Ellen, we have 3 people on the call. So we'll have you kind of catch up a couple of the questions for us, just your thoughts on them, if that's okay.
Yeah. And what questions are you?
Yeah. So, like the first question, what do you think Lance Armstrong's legacy is?
Oh. Well, so it's easy to see all the negative things about him, but in the discussion board, I said that he was the one to carry the consequences to be pointed out, but he benefited a lot of people. So he benefited the sports, the racing bikes. He benefited all these sponsors. A lot of sales, a lot of people were benefited because of this, and even people from that were sick from cancer, like all these people who well, Armstrong benefited. They were sick from cancer. He says that he raised about $500 million to help 3 million people.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point of view. Because all of us kind of saw it differently, but that's interesting that you bring it up like that.
Yeah, yeah, and he was the one who, at the end, like the bad guy of the day. But many people were involved, but they didn't have to set their names on that. That's easier.
Yeah, and that's interesting because I feel like there's plenty of people in the world, or even just in America, like that do great things, like Bill and Melinda Gates. People talk about them and how great they are. And like you said, Lance Armstrong's done a lot of good for a lot of people, but I feel like no one really remembers that. Like no one even really talks about him anymore, even though he has done those great things. So another question for you, Ellen. So obviously Armstrong organized and led a very complex cheating program. Who do you think suffered from his cheating, and what were the costs of just of the program in general?
Yeah, I think that he suffered even during the process, not only after the process when everything was obvious, but I think he felt a lot of pressure. You know, when everybody knows we are all with the light of Christ, and we know that we are going wrong when we make some decisions, but we rationalize our decisions and we decide to continue doing something, but we don't feel peace in ourselves. I think that's why the other co-workers complained about him, that he was not even able to talk to them and he was kind of isolated. I think that's part of the symptoms that he showed, that he was uncomfortable of what he was doing. And obviously he suffered after that, because everybody was like, hey, I told you and you denied it and you finally accepted and whatever. But he's been suffering, so he can't even participate, not even in a different sports, like from any sport. He's banned. Yeah, he suffered, I think, during and after the process.
Emily or Phil, do you have any thoughts on her comments at all?
I agree that he did. I don't know if it was this question or the last one. I think it was the last one. There was some good that came out of his legacy with the sponsors. He was able to raise all that money to help cancer patients. So I didn't consider that side of his affairs. So I agree with that.
Thank you.
Okay. Another question for Ellen. Do you think Armstrong's teammates were too loyal or not loyal enough to him? What do you think
I think they didn't mean to be loyal to him. Like, they were loyal to their own interests. Like, you are going to belong to the winning team and you are going to be the best in your position. Of course, your position is not to be the leader, but you're gonna be the best, and they wanted to be the best. And I took some abstract of the Hamilton said. He said, I took the pill and it worked. I wrote faster, I felt better. For me, the only fact that mattered was that for 1,000 days I had been cheated out of my livelihood, and there was no sign that things were going to get better. So I did what many others have done before me. I joined the Brotherhood. So he did it because of he wanted to. He said, I wrote faster and felt better. So they were at the beginning loyal for themselves. Yeah, it's like this. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's like this Gadianton's group that they betrayed each other, and then they choose a new king, and then they betrayed another king, and this kind of brotherhood is called loyalty.
Well,
Yeah, I
question
totally,
on
I
that.
totally agree with you. Sorry, go ahead, Phil.
When you mentioned that those people have a position on the team, like the swimmers, you're not going to be a leader, but you're going to be in your position to be your best. With that cycling team, now, did they all win or just the Lance?
I think that Lance won the whole thing. Like, they didn't win the tour, but their team still got recognition and they still got some of the money. And because they helped get their lead cyclists to the finish line, companies recognize them and sponsors recognize them. And a lot of times that's how you became the lead rider, is by supporting one to the finish line. And you will be sponsored as your own.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, it was just like if I invite you to do something wrong, it's like if you say something against me, you fall with me. So your loyalty is not because you love me, it's because you yourself don't want to fall down. So that was a kind of loyalty.
Yeah, I agree. And I made the comment, like they weren't loyal to themselves is what I said, because they knew, like you said, stop being loyal to himself and stop being true to himself, and they just lost themselves in the way. So I totally agree with you, Ellen. Have you ever witnessed, Ellen, a situation where, or can you think of an example where a leader has kind of acted in a way that Lance Armstrong did, of course, into a bad situation? And how did it make you feel?
I myself haven't witnessed or been involved in a situation like that, like in my work or my school or in my environment. No. But I mentioned a similar situation. Not that bad about being honest, but sometimes I disagree with some decisions that they have made. So things that I think unfair, and the leader says that's fair. And yeah, not that big, but it demotivates me, and it's like do whatever you want. So, but I think it's nothing to do with this level. And I express it like I don't agree with this, but if even so they want to continue, well.
Yeah, that's great that you can do that, because that can definitely be hard, especially when you know it's going to better your own agenda. It's hard to say no to those situations sometimes or call people out on it.
Yeah. I just think that it doesn't deals with my own. Like in this situation, they had to make decisions to participate and their integrity. So I haven't been put in that situation yet. So I hope, or I guess, that I couldn't participate. So that's what we are told, or we are taught, like to be, right?
Great. Well, I think that catches us back up to where we were when you logged on. The next question is, think of a situation where you witnessed talented followers follow a leader into an uncomfortable or bad zone. What was the situation? What were the results? And did anyone object?
I can go first on this one.
Okay.
One of the places when I've seen this is in like high school wrestling. So a lot of times, like, lifestyle with wrestling is very hard on your body because the coach wants you to lose weight right before wrestling before the tournaments, so they can lose weight and wrestle someone lower weight than them, and then they eat a bunch before the competition to like get like weigh more and be ahead of them in the competition. So, there's just a lot of unhealthy behaviors that go with wrestling, and I know those are all, from what I've seen, is that those are enforced within the company, and there's a lot of really talented, strong wrestlers out there, and it's kind of like you hurt your body just so you can compete and help your team win. So, I don't know, it's kind of similar to Lance Armstrong, like to do it for sport. So.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I never wrestled, but I had a lot of friends that did it, and it took a serious toll on them for sure. Okay. I'm going to think of other situations. We kind of discussed this one a little bit before Ellen jumped on the call. Are there any other thoughts?
Yeah, I just said that it was not my environment, but in history, a situation that I remember was Adolf Hitler, that he had very able and very talented people working for him, like the German officials, they were very good, like very professional, but he led them to a very uncomfortable, ugly situation.
That's funny that you bring that up, because that's right before you logged on, I talked about that as an example for a strong leader. That's funny.
Yeah, I was going to say, same analogy.
Yeah. Maybe I'm not so crazy. Okay. What basic principles guide your integrity? Are there times when there's a gray area, and how do you choose correctly?
I'll go. I wrote in my paper that my principles are Christ-like, and if I have a decisions to make, I'll think about how Jesus would decide. It doesn't mean that I don't get tempted or go in the gray area, but I usually have a feeling inside me tell me that what I'm considering is wrong. Sure, it's the Spirit, and that helps me decide which way to choose. So you can call it a conscience, or you can call it a Spirit prompting me. Yeah, I just follow those promptings, and it helps me make my choices better.
Yeah, that's great. I had the thought that, and this is kind of hard, I guess, but as I was writing, I realized I don't really think there is a gray area, because like you said, like the Spirit will prompt you and let you know what is right and wrong. And I think that there's really great things in this world that are definitely good, and then there's really bad things, and the things that you might consider gray area, if it's gray, it's leading you to the bad things, and you probably shouldn't be doing them or participating in them. And so, not to say that I'm great at that, everyone messes up, but I think that, like, overall, there probably shouldn't be a gray area, because if we're in that area, we're already gone. We're out of the good, and that's not where we want to be.
Well, for me,
when that lottery was up to, not the one that was 1.5 billion, but the one before that was $1 billion. But I had a dream, like, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, that I won the lottery, and I didn't believe it in my dream, but it kept telling me that I did. And I remember the numbers and I wrote them down. I'm a convert to the church. I've been in it since '94, I guess. I used to play the lottery. I used to play those dream numbers. It never hit. But a couple months ago, when it was that big pot, I was thinking about it. Hey, we could really use even a little piece of this. And I had a prompting of, like a voice say, that's too much money. So I didn't play. And like a week later, I saw a flash on the TV screen, somebody's ticket with the winning numbers, and they were my numbers. They all looked like my dream numbers. So I would have been a share of that $1 billion, but I knew too much. It would have ruined me. I even told the wife, we don't play because that much money will ruin a person. I don't know if this relates to the lesson or not.
No, yeah, it does. Thank you for sharing. Ellen, you had a thought that you wanted to share as well, right?
Yeah, wow, such an amazing experience, Phil. Well, I was gonna say that for me, everything is blurry all the time. Like when I talk, I haven't been a member of the church all my life, and I have many friends who are not members, and we can discuss these commandments. Uh, anything like word of wisdom or homosexual marriage or whatever. And if I start rationalizing, I find very good points of what they say, and it's like, oh, it makes sense. It sounds good. But for me, because everything, I can question anything. Why this or whatever, and there are always good points to say it's good not to do this or it's good not to do that if I think with my natural brain. But that's why I just follow the same principle that, well, I may not understand, or it seems that is logical and it's good and it seems all this that I rationalize, but if Jesus or God or say this is not what is convenient. So that's why I said, well, I won't do this or I won't do that, even though I think it's more convenient. So this makes my life easier. So to measure my actions or my integrity according to these standards. Like later on, I may understand better, just like Phil did it, or maybe not, but it's easier, and I think I have a better life since I became a member of the church. That's for sure.
Oh, definitely. Me too, yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you.
I agree with like Phil and Ellen. Is that with the gray area and what you said, that there's really shouldn't be any gray areas if we're following the Spirit, that we'll be able to know, I guess, the closer we are to the Spirit, a better idea of like what the black and white of the situation is. Because if anything feels like it's a gray area, then you probably shouldn't do it and like lean towards like, I don't know, the white area, what's good and right and true and what would bring the Spirit. So I think the biggest thing is like, would this bring the Spirit into my life or not? The Spirit, if it doesn't, then probably shouldn't do it.
I just remember the meme I found, these Facebook memes that it says that whatever that costs your peace, it's too expensive. Whatever that costs your peace, I think your peace of mind or whatever, it's too expensive.
Interesting. All right. Last question, and this is a good one, so I'm hoping we all have good answers. How will you personally measure your life, and how will you measure your successes?
I can go first. I measure my life by the happiness I have with my family. Sure, I want to pay off my house and have a comfortable retirement, but more importantly, I want to be close with my family and my grandchildren. This cannot happen if I only put wealth first. Too many times I look aside and see those who have a lot, and I look at myself and where I've come along the way of my life, and sometimes I envy them. And even though I never knew what covet means in the scriptures, don't covet anything of thy neighbor. But now I think it was just a few weeks ago that it finally hit me what that means. It's not to have envy. Don't envy others and want what they have. So yeah, there's people who may not live a good life, but yet for some reason they became wealthy and famous and what have you. But I don't measure my wealth. Is this about wealth? I don't measure my life that way. Mine's about family happiness and how spiritual I'm getting to life. So.
Yeah, I agree with you. One thing that I said in my thoughts, and this kind of went along with what the author of the second article said, was that I try to measure based on the number of people I've helped. But I've added on that, like, that includes myself, and it's not being selfish. But there's a lot going on in the world right now that just takes a toll on people, and I think it's so important to just take time and help yourself and grow closer to Heavenly Father. Just do whatever it is that brings you happy and peace in your heart, so that you can, because when you're taking care of yourself, you're able to take care of others. If you're neglecting yourself, you're no help to anybody. I think it's so important to take care of yourself so that you can help others and benefit others and serve always. And that's just kind of how I measure my life, is by the number of happy moments, even in sad times, those happy moments, happy feelings, and the number of people I'm able to help.
I agree with what both of you guys have said, that it's not measured by money. Like, yes, you should make enough money to be comfortable, but after that, it's kind of like, unless you're making it to help others, then it's not really benefiting anyone just to have money. So I think how I like measure my life and my success is like, how well have I become a disciple of Christ? Like what you said, Alice, like how much have I helped others? And especially what Phil said, like how much have I helped my own family? Because we try and go out and serve other people outside of our own circle of influence, and like do these great big things like, oh, I like made humanitarian kits for like kids in Haiti or things like that. But like, yes, that is helpful, but then neglecting your own family or your own spouse or like your children that just want your time and your attention. So I think I'll measure it, I guess, like how happy my family is and how close I've been able to like help us become an eternal family.
Yeah, we had a special meeting last Sunday. Like from Salt Lake City, they had a special transmissions for every state in Mexico, all around the country. And they were giving different messages, but in general, what I understood, it was that like to become a better Christ disciple, to develop his Christ-like attributes. They say like make sure you have a temple recommend. Remember that you are going to be next life with any principle of intelligence you develop here, and this part of the service, and try to learn the language of the spirit. So those are the things that I remembered, and this is why I think this is a good way to measure your life. Like if you follow these principles, the church principles, uh, whatever the rest in your life is gonna be okay. Despite they talk that you are gonna have hard times or socially or whatever, you're gonna be okay. So in my answer, I answered that like it's easier to follow your principles 100% of times than 98% of times. that was in the ring. Like I think, especially for a person that me that sometimes finds blurry a lot of big gray areas. So for me, it's easier to follow 100% of times these principles. So that's a way for me to measure my work.
Those are great answers. Well, that's all the questions. Does anyone else have any thoughts or comments from the articles this week?
Yeah, I had one thought that I always knew about the cycling and the Tour de France, and I didn't know about the other two races that they have as well. But I didn't know that all of the athletes are built to that. It started off with one person, and if you wanted to catch the leader, you had to dope yourself. And from what I'm reading in this week's lesson, the majority of the cyclists were dopers. Not even just on Lance's team, but all other teams as well. I didn't know it was so prevalent in that sport.
Yeah, I didn't realize that either, and it's almost like that's part of it. It's just as normal as putting on your helmet for the day. Is kind of what I got from it. Which is sad because if I go back to legacy for a second, it does make me sad because Lance wasn't the only one, and like he said, everyone was doing it. If he wanted to be faster, if he wanted to continue to improve, like everyone was counting on him to, he had to do it. So it makes me sad that that was the case. But I still think it kind of falls back on that integrity and how you're going to measure your life. Like, is it worth it to you? And that's where he probably just wasn't confident enough in himself. He didn't have the knowledge that we do, because obviously having a knowledge of the gospel can make all things much more durable and easier to go through, and you realize like this isn't worth it in the long run compared to eternity. Like this one Tour de France or 7, it doesn't matter. It's not worth it. And so I think that because he's maybe missing out on some of that knowledge, it was just easy for him to say, yeah, like it's normal, it's fine, everything's okay. And it is sad, though, that he took a lot of the blame, whereas everyone else is kind of getting off scot-free or being praised for speaking out against him when they did just the same things.
And I also, it makes me think about, like, as you said, every participant or most of them had to do it. Like, the problem, I think, it's about society. Like, are they asking too much? If they know that a normal body, a clean body can't achieve those measures, why the mainstream societies, media, whatever, whoever is asking them or pushing them to get to that level? Like, not only Viking races, but any athlete. Like, I was thinking about Michael Phelps, or I wondered what if they also had to do something like that. I'm not saying that they had to, but it's like, what are we doing, like, to push them to be the best, but to be the best in a very demanding way?
And I think that's kind of where the adversary comes into play, because I think he's not only pushing the athletes and like working on them, because there's greed and you want fame and fortune, and so obviously that's at play. But I think he also has to do maybe with, like you said, the spectators. Then like we expect this from them, and it's not humanly possible probably without doping, but we still want it anyways, and we want to see it. And so we get mad at them for what they're doing, but we get mad when they can't achieve these goals either. And so maybe that's somewhere where we're kind of failing as a society, is these just extreme expectations that are never going to happen.
It's like a Roman circus.
Yeah. Well, does anyone else have any other thoughts before we go?
No.
Okay. So is it Emily, are you leading next week? Oh, we're not having it next week.
Yeah, but I think I was the next leader, so I guess I'll be doing it the week 11.
Yes, week 11. Sounds good. Thank you all for participating today. I'll send you the link as soon as I get it all uploaded.
Thanks.
Thank you, Molly.
Thanks.
Have a good week.
You too.